Keir Starmer was attacked by his own Labour Mayor Ros Jones, who said he needs to start listening after Labour suffered huge defeats in yesterday's elections.
I think national government needs to look and see what people are saying. I wrote as soon as the winter fuel allowance was actually muted, and I said it was wrong, and therefore I stepped in immediately and used our household support fund to ensure no one in Doncaster went cold during the winter.
You said Keir Starmer has to listen to what people are saying.
Well, I think the results here tonight will demonstrate that they need to be listening to the man, woman and businesses on the street and actually deliver for the people, with the people.
Has he been listening thus far?
Well, on certainly 2 or 3 occasions, I would say no, they haven't actually realised, because the people of Doncaster know how hard life can be, and it's about delivering for them, their children and their children's children.
The Prime Minister broke his silence today, admitting results had been disappointing.
Nigel Farage, I'm afraid, says you're a coward for not campaigning in Runcorn. Are you a coward?
Look, the results are disappointing, and I could stand here and say to you, opposition parties always do well in by-elections like this. It was very close in Runcorn, etc., etc. What I want to say is my response is we get it. And we were elected in last year to bring about change. That's what people desperately want. We started that work. The NHS waiting lists are down. Wages are up more than prices. Interest rates are down. But the message from these results, I think, is go further, go faster. That chimes with what I want to do, and that's what I take out of this. And I'm determined that we will go further and faster on the change that people want to see.
6 votes, so you could have won it.
Well, it was very, very close, but I'm not going to stand here and just say it was close. In the end, it's a binary outcome. You either win or you don't win. The question is how do you make it? So I'm not going to respond by simply saying it was close. I want a better response than that, which is to say, I get it. I do know that change is needed. We are making that change. We need to go further and faster. I've been saying this for a number of weeks. This reinforces my determination that will deliver the change that people want across the country.
He had faced criticism for not campaigning in person for the Runcorn by-election, after having been warned that he could lose it for his party.
So just finally, you were here yesterday. Labour have thrown everything at this. Pretty much everybody has been up here, but not the Prime Minister. Why do you think that is?
Because he's a coward. He doesn't lead from the front. He obviously feared they might lose, therefore he didn't come. I knocked on doors for 8 hours today, and I would have been here in this hall with our candidate, regardless whether we'd won or lost by 6 votes. And somehow with Keir Starmer, who, by the way, is a perfectly decent human being, but somehow with Keir Starmer, it's caution, 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 and no one really knows quite what he actually believes.
And just finally, how many of the mayoralties do you think you're going to win? 2, 3?
Well, we've just lost 2 by an absolute cigarette paper in North Tyneside and in Doncaster. We're winning in Lincolnshire, and we will win in Hull, probably by quite a big margin.
Labour Chair Ellie Reeves says it's not unusual for a government to lose a by-election.
Are you as surprised at these results as the rest of us?
Well, look, it was a mixed night. Obviously, Labour held on to the West of England Combined Authority mayor, the mayors in Doncaster and in North Tyneside. We weren't able to hold on to the parliamentary seat of Runcorn. Incumbent governments often don't do well in parliamentary by-elections. Obviously, this one was being held in very difficult circumstances following the resignation of the MP here. I think what was interesting about that election is the Tories didn't seem to put up much of a campaign, and a big part of that seat was the former Weaver Vale seat, which was Conservative until 2017. But instead, Esther McVeigh, for example, said that the Tories shouldn't fight there, that they should leave it to Reform to win the seat.
worry you? Because in some ways that's a form of tactical voting, it's an unspoken pact, and actually if that was repeated at the next election, if in all the places where potentially reform could win, the Conservatives gave up, that would be a huge headache for Labour MPs, wouldn't it?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of moderate voters that would be appalled of the idea of a pact between the Conservatives and Reform. And, you know, we heard Robert Jenrick just last week talk about a coalition between the Conservatives and Reform. I think both of those parties need to come clean about any grubby backroom deals. You know, if people are voting Reform, are they getting Conservative? If they're voting Conservative, are they getting Reform? And I think they need to be clear about that.
Are you saying people who vote Reform are in some way extreme?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the Conservatives and Reform need to come clean about any coalitions between the two parties.
But forgive me, but you did say moderate voters would be upset. So you're saying people aren't moderate if they vote Reform?
Well, look, I think that people need to know what there is they're voting for. And some of the comments made by Robert Jenrick and by Esther McVeigh suggest that there are these deals going on behind closed doors. And I think that those two parties need to be clear about that.
GB News political editor Christopher Hope said Thursday night's political earthquake was a wake-up call for the Tories and Labour.
It's a bad night for both the two main parties. I mean, look at Greater Lincolnshire, how badly the Tories did there, and they fought that one. Look how badly Labour did in the Runcorn by-election. They lost that. They lost an MP. That's a disaster for their party. It was the 49th safest seat at the general election, the landslide election, just 10 months ago. It's a complete wake-up call, I think, for the main parties. Also, I'm struck, I think, by the challenge faced by Nigel Farage. He says he's not a protest party, but really, in terms of MPs, he is a protest party. Are we going to see now more organisation, portfolios for different of his 5 MPs? Who's in charge of the economy? Who's in charge of home affairs? Who's in charge of health? Who do we go to? That's what we don't have at the moment, and that was the criticism labelled at his party by Rupert Lowe, because the disaffected independent MP now. He was right in that sense.
But do you need that when a party is, in parliamentary terms, that small?
I think when you have a party... If a party is that small and it's a protest party, you don't need it. If a party has pretensions on being a governing party, then that's possible. I mean, sending here some forecasts on what this vote would mean at the general election, it would give the Reform UK party a huge majority. Big beasts who would fall were the Reform UK by-election replicated at a general election. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, Rachel Reeves, she's out. Liz Kendall, work and pension, she's gone. Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, she loses her seat. John Healey, Defence Secretary. Pam McFadden, the Cabinet Office Minister. These people, big beasts, these heads are rolling if this Runcorn result is reflected in a general election.
Of course, people would say by-elections very rarely reflect what's coming up in a general election, but what's different about this is it's not the opposition party that has benefited from the government's malaise, but Reform have a huge advantage here, don't they? They have no record to defend. So going into the next election, nobody can say, oh, well, you're saying this, but last time you were in power, you did this, which is, of course, what the Conservatives are going to face. So is it going to be just plain sailing ahead for Reform now?
It will be for a while, but as you said earlier, they will be getting power over budgets. There'll be choices made, decisions made about spending, and also there'll be scrutiny on these councillors. And if they put a foot wrong, the two main parties will jump on that. And I think they'll be punished much more than other parties because they're so new. But let's look at what the Labour Party are saying. They're saying, particularly in Runcorn, it's a narrow defeat, but they need to work harder and quicker with their plan for change. That is a challenge for Labour, but will it be enough?